In this video, we're going to see a few more things that we can do when reading from an input file. So I've already got it set up with the things we already know how to do. So I've added the header file fstream so that I can access input and output files. I've defined a file stream object for inputting from a file. I've opened it and associated it with the file inventory.txt. And then I've tested for file open errors. So I've tested if fn is true, that means it's worked, and inside this true part I'm going to put all the code I want to do with this file when it works. Else, this means, so this is when the file didn't open correctly, I'm simply going to print out an error message and then it will shut down right away. Okay. I've also added an fn close. I try to put this early because I tend to forget it at the end. So here I've added it before I got started. So this is my basic outline of what I need to do when I'm using an input file. Let's go look at the input file we're going to be using today. This is called inventory.txt, and it has a lot of information about inventory parts. And for each part it has a part number, a quantity on hand, and a description. So notice how this is different than just a long line of single numbers. So there's several things we need to read here. And we need to know that when we read an input file, it has got to go exactly in order. When the program opens this file, it will start right at the very beginning of the file. So the first thing that you read is the part number. And after you've read that, the next thing to be read is the quantity on hand. And after that is the description. There isn't any way, it doesn't work to try to read all the part numbers first, because it has to go in order. So it has to do the part number, it reads this whole line before it gets to the next part number. So you need to know that that's the order that it reads in, because your program has got to follow that pattern. It has to read the file the way that it exists. So now let's go in, and we know that we have three things with each part. So we want to create variables to be able to read those into. So the part number is an int. So I can make it an int, and quantity is an int. But the description is a string. So if I'm going to use string, I want to make sure and come up here and pound include the header file string. Some environments add that automatically and others do not, so it's always a good idea to just add it to make sure it compiles on any environment. All right, now I've created those values. Now I want to create a while loop that is true. And before, when we did this, we did a while and we did a read. But all we did was read one thing. Well, that still is the case, that we only need to read one thing. So the first thing that we're going to read is a part number. So that's what I'm going to put in my condition, part number. And if that is true, if there is a part number there, then I know that there are other things to read. So if I read and get the part number, then I know after that is a quantity. On the other hand, if I read down here and there's nothing, there's no part number, then I know there's not going to be any quantity or description either. So just simply reading the very first thing is enough information to tell me whether I should keep looping or whether I should stop. So that's what I want to use for my condition. Remember that this condition will be true when there's a part number to read. It'll be false when it's reached the end of the file and there's nothing else to read. Also, this primes the loop, so when I very first get there, it will actually read an item from the file, and it works as my update at the end of the loop and a way to stop. So it handles all those things. Now, so if this is true, then we want to go inside and read the next thing. The next thing is going to be the quantity, and then we want to read the next thing, which is description. Well, notice that these descriptions may have white space, so we can't just use a simple extraction operator. We need to use a getLine to get them, since it includes white space. So I'm going to use getLine. In getLine, we want to tell it where we're getting it from and where we want to store it. And the other thing, we want to remember that detail. When we go from using an extraction operator to getLine, we need to worry about white space between here, because these two do white space differently. So the extraction operator is going to read this quantity, and it's going to stop right there. And then our get line is going to begin reading and go till it gets to carriage return, so it'll read that much. Notice that in that case we're going to be picking up an extra space. So we want to ignore that space. We do not want that to be part of our description. So right here between the extraction operator read and the get line read, we are going to do an fn.ignore. Now notice how these look like the way we did get line and ignore before, except now they're using the name of our file stream rather than cin. And that's what we want it to do. We want it to be ignoring that character in the file. So we're using fn in all those places. All right, that then will complete our reading. What kind of work do we want to do in here? Well, we want to count how many different items we have in inventory and how many total pieces. So different items would be, each one of these would be an item. So the 3/4 inch washer is an item, 3/4 inch nut is an item, 3/4 inch by 1.5 inch bolt is an item, and then total pieces would be the total of all of these. All right, so adding these together. So what these are really, this is a counter to count each item, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, to count each item. And this is an accumulator to accumulate how many pieces. So we've used both of those before. We're going to add, a count is going to be of type int, and is going to be equal, we're going to start out equal to 0. Accumulators can be of a variety of types, but it's whatever we're adding together. And in this case, we're accumulating integers. So we're going to make our total be of type int, and we're going to start it out 0. So our work is going to be to count the part, right, to see how many different items. So we're going to simply increment count, and to total, what are we totaling? We're totaling the quantity. All right, so we can get the number of pieces. And once we do that work, then we want to go ahead and report cout. There are, and here we're going to put count different items in inventory. And we want to report there are, and here we're going to report the total pieces. Total pieces in inventory. And then we can finally run our file and run our program and see how it's working. So there are 25 different items in inventory. There are 9,649 total pieces in inventory. And that's how we access in an input file when it has multiple things in it. The real detail you need to know here is that the program always starts at the beginning and reads exactly in order, one line at a time. And so you have to design your program around that specific movement through the file.